Hey, it is your buddy, Peace and Harmony, with you here today. Much love going out to all the beautiful, empowered harmonizers. We're zooming in and focusing in a little bit more in depth in terms of understanding a red flag of a relationship with a narcissist or a psychopath. And that is specifically the phenomenon of the Dr. Jekyll and Hyde sort of personality flip or switch. It's based on a a novella that was written by a Scottish author back in the late 1800s that talks about a personality that metamorphosized from the good and evil, sort of apparently within the same individual, where they would change masks, where they would metamorphosize or transform into a completely different person. A good and, basically speaks to the metaphysical or philosophical or existential question, is there good and evil? And this can this be very discrete and pronounced within the same individual. And, whether it's good versus evil, loving versus unloving, gentle versus harsh, there's going to be a spectrum of personality traits and positions, as they're exhibited throughout someone's life. This is just a given. But when we're talking about someone who is narcissistic, we're really talking about what can be viewed or felt or experienced as two different people. When the mask drops, the persona, the facade, meaning the persona, the appearance as if this person is one way, is never as discreet and so as pronounced as someone is who is narcissistic and even more so psychopathic. They will put on airs, put on an appearance as if, put on an act, a charade, as if, and it's really, based on manipulation. So the narcissist will sort of betray themselves but become consciously aware. This is also known as lying or pathological lying, to cover up or conceal the insecurities or inadequacies that are felt by a narcissist. Particularly, they don't like to feel normal, status quo, like other people, like I'm just like everybody else. They don't really prescribe or subscribe to that feeling. They don't feel that they are just ordinary, that is to be mediocre, boring, not, who they feel that their self-image is. And the Dr. Jekyll and Hyde, and then flipping over, where all of a sudden this person seems to be, as a red flag, they're acting out of character. They're acting like someone who you might not know or you might not recognize. So usually there's a consistency of personality traits. There's a consistency of viewpoints. There's a consistency of how you might expect someone to act. This is sort of what is known as the stability of personality, or sort of a core sense of self or self-image within that person, otherwise known as what they identify to, relate to, or their identity, their I am. And there can be a pronounced shift and sort of spinning off through someone who is narcissistic or psychopathic, where you don't really feel that you might get a sneaky feeling or a red flag feeling that there is something off, that this person is shifty, this person, what you see is not what you get, or kind of a fear. In other words, when you've seen the mask begin to crack, usually people will then, walk on eggshells, as we were saying earlier, or they'll act in ways to sort of try to prevent this person from losing the love bombing mask. So it's a feeling as if they are one way, but they could easily swing to the other side if situations are not just so, if they're not just right. So this Dr. Jekyll and Hyde is feeling as if you don't really know the person. And likewise, then, as a red flag for these types of relationships, you feel that the person doesn't really know you, or maybe even want to get to know you on an in-depth, in-person basis. And, it's not just you, but it can have to do with a lot of all their other close and intimate relationships, even their familiar relationships. And I think this is a sad state of situation and affairs for people because, a narcissist and a psychopath, they can't really just be themselves. They have to be an ulterior version of themselves. They can't really be authentic. They can't let their emotions out. And if they do, oftentimes that is in the devalue and discard stage where you're getting to know how they truly feel. But this could be a red flag that they're on their way out. In other words, once they've sort of let their mask down and you've seen them, this is going to be, the middle to end chapters of the relationship as you know it, because, they don't like to be related to as if they're normal. They want to be super normal, superhuman, better than, superior than. And, especially, on the ego basis of a narcissist, one of the red flags is that, just sort of a superficial, gratuitous sort of affection, and then they might be very cold. So you can see the two sides of the same coin, if you will, in all areas. So whether it's time spent, whether it's affection, they might give gratuitous or just sort of superficial affection, just sort of a cold, squeeze of the shoulder, and then act that you're now going to give them the half an hour back rub, but then they might then flip to the other side and be very non-affectionate. And then it does not make sense in sort of a expectation in the relationship or counting or reliability moving forward, because you don't know what you're going to get. Are you going to get the good, or are you going to get the evil? Are you, just to use that terminology from the Dr. Jekyll and Hyde, but it's, the two-facedness, the, behind your back. These people will swivel or toggle from one way to another. And it's not just, based on what time of day it is or what time of week it is. In other words, they're nicer on Fridays. This can be really a whole variety of stages that they exemplify in the relationship, where they can seem very easygoing and then very uptight, on the extreme. They can seem very lackadaisical or easygoing or laid back, and then very intense, very rushed, very hurried. And, you just sort of feel that this is not, as a red flag, that, why is this just sort of, do we have this wide or extreme a spectrum? Most people have just sort of a bell curve, it's just sort of where they sort of hover around. And, those people who are more stable tend to be more consistent, and more, ongoing and persistent in their personality or how they handle things. In other words, they're cool, calm, and collected. They're not flying off the handle. They're not rattled easily. And so, within the relationship, you'll find that the mask will drop as you getting into the situation where you can't, either appease them, things aren't going their way, they're unhappy with, what they're getting in terms of superior treatment, and so they might give up on the relationship for a time being, or they might be sort of scouting out another relationship, scanning the horizon for other people to take your place. That is usually how it is experienced and is a red flag. So this sort of Dr. Jekyll and Hyde, just sort of, they're just sort of an inconsistency or mood lability, a very moodiness. And, this can vary all throughout the zodiac. I mean, different personalities are more brooding than others. This is not to take that quality away or to be judgmental, but really just sort of a true flipping of just sort of approaches, and that they can turn on you on a dime, turn on you on the drop of a feather, not be reliable, not be consistent. And so there's an inconsistency that oftentimes can pervade a relationship with a narcissist or a psychopath at any stage of the game. And whether it's the love bombing, the devalue, or discard. And so the red flag is usually when people then interpret this as something wrong with them. And so they end up either, just swallowing and not trying to upset them. So again, the locus of control is one of the narcissist or the psychopath. What do I need to do to adapt and adjust to be a better match, a better partner, a better boyfriend, a better girlfriend, a better spouse, usually the person will then try to, find out what it is that they've done wrong and then try to avoid it, and then furthermore shut down communication that could upset the narcissist or the psychopath. So, there becomes this sort of internal stonewalling or internal shutting down of what should be a normal, natural comfort level of communication, where people don't want to upset the narcissist. They want the good guy to be there. They want the good girl to be there. So they end up then, modifying their own behavior to try to get, on the good side. So once again, it's the sacrifice is on the ear of the others rather than the narcissist or the psychopath having to make adjustments or amends. And, some people then in the beginning, I think that they feel, well, this is normal. I should put up with this. I should tolerate. So they they are very dismissive of the red flags rather than saying, you know what, this is a little bit off. This isn't good for me. This person is not reliable, but people tend to make excuses for a narcissist or a psychopath because they make this for themselves oftentimes. A narcissist or a psychopath, I was just, this, that, but they won't really, sort of explain and stop the behavior, or they will be insensitive to the impact that it has on others because of their lack of empathy. Once again, very gratuitous. You're not going to find really a narcissist or a psychopath apologizing. I'm sorry. These words are not going to creep themselves, across their lips. They're not going to feel that they have done anything wrong. If anyone should be sorry, it's that you're needing too much or wanting too much. So it's usually the finger is pointed in others, and that, other people are disrespectful, and you shouldn't, need this. You shouldn't want this. You shouldn't want a commitment. You shouldn't want to be there on holidays. They feel that you're asking too much. So people then get smaller and smaller sort of edge of the stick, of the handle, so to speak. And then people then get addicted to just sort of this hyper arousal, or what can then become a concern, a paranoia, and then feel that, then the codependency really kicks in. In other words, they use this sort of Dr. Jekyll and Hyde as more of a reason to take care of this person. Well, let me alleviate them of this burden of having a bad side, or having to feel that they have to, communicate this bad side of their personality. Let's keep it under wraps. Let me please them. Let me always be available. Let me always give them the affection. Let me make their favorite dinner. Let me, warm up their socks and get their, newspaper ready, get their blanket ready, get whatever ready. They find ways to keep the person sort of, in a tense relationship that is oftentimes wrought with, a few months on down the road, then here it comes again, and it becomes more of the devalue and discard, where you can't sort of pull them back into the relationship ring because they're either, bored, the psychopath or the narcissist, they'll get bored very easily. And it's not that you're boring. It's not that you're not interesting enough, that you don't have enough going on. A lot of people tend to, self-devalue and absorb that and internalize it and make that part of their I am. And then because the relationship has so much weight, that they then, interpret it something negatively about themselves. They always try to say it's their fault, particularly kids in relationships with narcissistic parents who have the same Dr. Jekyll and Hyde, very pronounced, they're happy now or they're not happy, and then walking on eggshells, not being a kid, not being a spouse, just sort of dissociating from who they are or what they need in order to, keep that bad side from coming out. So they become, just sort of like, they just try to have like this superhuman x-ray vision to sort of prevent this other side from coming out, or the narcissist rage, or the abandonment, or the ignoring, or the sort of, where they sort of get sequestered into their own world. They just sort of tap out on other relationships. And people either then they will spend weeks, months, and years sort of waiting for them, for the good stuff, for the good, part to become more pronounced. And so people end up then wasting a lot of time making excuses for them and not knowing that this is going to be a stable part of a relationship with them. Meaning that, this is going to be how it is. And it's, even though people might try to make an attempt to control them by pleasing them, you cannot control or change the narcissist or the psychopathic from swinging, through these polar opposites. It's going to, it's what they do. It's important that you have to sort of get into an acceptance mode and then learn that you are needing and then are able to identify red flags in others and in relationships when they come up. And then stop ignoring, stop numbing yourselves out to the red flags. And this takes courage. This takes becoming accountable. This requires trust. This requires independence. This requires autonomy. This requires self-esteem. This requires some tough love. This requires some being rigorously honest with yourself. These are really important aspects of healing and then, being able to move through a relationship. We're not saying get over, moving through it energetically so that you're not living a life or that's stalemated, living in a stranglehold or a double bind where you feel that no matter what you do, you can't, make progress within life. That is a erroneous thinking. If you feel that life is not going to get better, you're not going to get better, or there aren't other relationships, that is false thinking. That is erroneous thinking. That is a thought form that is meant to keep you stuck, bewildered, and oftentimes going down versus up. What I call negative orderly direction thinking, behaving, feeling, and becoming. The wrong, you're allowing the negative to take over, and it is an allow state. So if you're allowing the red flags to just pass you by, that is an allow state. It becomes a willful, just sort of ignoring. It becomes a willful numbing. And it's oftentimes unconscious, but you have to become aware of that and become more conscious and stop willing, the negative to preside over your happiness. Abraham Lincoln, you're about as happy as you make up your mind to be. Really think about that and really think about the power of choice that you have. And if you firmly believe that the narcissist is going to be or the psychopath is going to be the best that life has to offer you, I would encourage you to challenge that. I would encourage you to check out that thought form. I'd encourage you to say, to look at, are you really stuck? And I would encourage you to perhaps, look at that as a flawed thought form, and that is perhaps an automatic thinking that is arrived out of lack of self-belief, lack of self-esteem, lack of belief in trust in the universe, and that there is, better there for you. If you were to only open your mind, you have to have an allow state. Just as you allow the negative to come in and overwhelm you, you have to allow the positive to also come in and be able to support you. So as long as you're going to be allowing, why don't you allow on the positive and give yourself some credit next time for acknowledging and validating the red flags. Give yourself some credit, even if you're not used to receiving the credit, even if the narcissist or the psychopath has never given you credit. That is oftentimes by design. And it's important that you then relate to yourself differently than the narcissist or the psychopath has related to you. This is your buddy. Peace and harmony with you here today, and I hope that these videos do help. Please share, please subscribe, and please donate and join the new Peace and Harmony memberships for more great tools, videos, discussion, and support. Have a beautiful day.